Whispers in the circuits. We should have known something was wrong the moment we entered human space. It wasn't anything major at first. Just small things. A control panel lagging for a fraction of a second. A gun turret inexplicably going offline before rebooting itself moments later. Diagnostic reports showing minor fluctuations that couldn't be explained. All of it was within acceptable margins, but my instincts told me something was off. Then there were the missing socks. It started with a few crew members complaining about misplacing them. An oddity, considering how disciplined our species was when it came to order. At first, we dismissed it as carelessness, but then they started reappearing in bizarre places, tucked inside control panels, stuffed into air vents, folded neatly on the command chair in the bridge when no one had placed them there. Still, it was all so minor, just anomalies, nothing worth reporting to the high command. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. But deep down, something gnawed at me. This was our first diplomatic mission to the human territories, and we had heard the stories. The other species in the Galactic Council spoke of humans with equal parts fascination and unease. Their technological advancements were impressive, their ability to wage war unmatched, but it wasn't just their brute force that unsettled the Council. It was their unpredictability. No other species had ever adapted so quickly, so relentlessly. They had a way of bending reality to their will, finding solutions where others saw insurmountable problems. It was unnatural. As we docked at the massive orbital station above Terra 3, I felt my nerves tighten. The docking procedure was routine, but the moment the ship locked into place, I heard it, a faint click from the airlock controls. A small noise, almost imperceptible, yet my ears picked it up instantly. I moved toward the airlock, expecting the usual smooth hiss as the doors cycled open. Instead, they jammed. The warning panel flickered, and the error message displayed a single word: misalignment. I frowned. That was impossible. The ship had just been cleared for docking seconds ago. Sighing, I slammed a fist against the control panel, what the humans called percussive maintenance. Miraculously, it worked. The door shuttered, the misalignment error vanished, and the airlock cycled open, as if nothing had happened. A coincidence, maybe. But I had a sinking feeling it wasn't. First impressions. The human diplomat was waiting for us as we stepped onto the station. He was tall by human standards, broad-shouldered, with an easy smile that did little to hide the sharp intelligence behind his eyes. Todd, he introduced himself. Simple, direct, unceremonious, just like the humans themselves. "Welcome to Terra 3, he said, offering his hand in greeting. I hesitated before taking it. The human tradition of handshakes was something my people had only recently adopted, and even now, it felt strange. "Trouble on the way in?" Todd asked casually as we walked. I glanced at him. He had the look of someone who already knew the answer but was waiting for me to confirm it. "Just minor inconveniences," I admitted. "Technical errors. Nothing major." Todd grinned. "Bah. The little things." His tone was amused, knowing, as if he had expected it. A flicker of unease crawled down my spine. Before I could press him for clarification, we arrived at the diplomatic hall, a spacious room lined with glass windows that overlooked the planet below. A stunning view. Yet my focus was elsewhere. In the far corner, a group of human engineers moved with surprising urgency. They weren't just performing routine maintenance, they were searching for something. Every few minutes, one of them would stop, check a panel, mutter something under their breath, and then move on. "Technical difficulties?" I asked, nodding toward them. Todd followed my gaze. "Something like that," he admitted. Then, with a sly grin, he added, "We have visitors from time to time." I frowned. "Visitors?" He chuckled but didn't elaborate. The first sighting. It wasn't until later that I saw it with my own eyes. We had settled into negotiations, discussing trade agreements, defense collaborations, and economic partnerships. Despite my initial misgivings, I found myself appreciating the human approach: efficient, practical, and, above all, flexible. Then, it happened. One of the engineers stormed into the room, holding something in his cupped hands. The others at the table barely reacted, as if this was entirely normal. Todd sighed. Already. The engineer nodded. Found him in the conduit. He's been messing with the power relays again. Curious, I leaned forward to get a better look. At first, I thought it was some sort of intricate machine, perhaps a drone or a specialized repair unit. But the moment the cloth covering was pulled away, I realized how wrong I was. It was small, no more than 1.5 inches tall. Its body was covered in an old-fashioned mechanic's uniform, yellow with a bright blue helmet. A pair of translucent, wing-like protrusions jutted from the sides of its head. Its eyes, large, glowing, and far too intelligent, locked onto mine. I stiffened. It grinned, a mouth full of sharp, wolf-like teeth. "What is that?" I asked, barely keeping my voice steady. "A gremlin," Todd said matter-of-factly, as if that explained everything. The tiny creature squeaked something in a language my translator couldn't process. The engineer holding it just chuckled. Yeah. You know the rules, Angus. No messing with guest ships." The gremlin, Angus, apparently, made a series of quick gestures, waving its small arms as if protesting its innocence. Todd rolled his eyes. "He says he was helping." "Helping?" I repeated in disbelief. "By sabotaging my ship." The engineer smirked. No. He was just adjusting things." I took a step back, my mind racing. I had heard rumors, whispers in the council chambers about strange occurrences in human territories, ships behaving oddly, systems misfiring only to fix themselves moments later, objects disappearing only to reappear in impossible locations. No one had ever proven anything. No one had dared to suggest that humans were hiding something so bizarre. And yet here it was, a living, breathing myth held in the palm of a human's hand. The tiny gremlin gave another squeaky, guttural response. The engineer laughed. "He says he'll repair whatever he broke, and that he's terribly sorry for the inconvenience." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I turned to Todd. "Are you telling me these things? These gremlins live on human ships?" "Not just our ships," Todd said with a smirk. "They work for us." I stared at him. The humans had tamed the chaos. They had turned myth into workforce. And I had a sinking feeling that my understanding of this species was about to change forever. The engineers of chaos. I could barely process what I had just witnessed. The tiny creature, barely the size of my palm, had an aura of confidence. No, defiance, far too large for its body. It stood there, its glowing blue eyes gleaming with amusement as it chattered away in a language my translator couldn't decipher. A gremlin. Not just some strange, undocumented life form, not some invasive pest, but a fully sentient, intelligent being, one that, by all accounts, worked with humans. My mind raced as I turned to Todd, my human diplomatic counterpart. "Are you seriously telling me these creatures work for you?" Todd shrugged with an infuriating smirk. "It's a bit more complicated than that." Behind him, the engineer holding the gremlin let out a small chuckle. "Angus here has been causing trouble again. He was messing with the power conduits right where the ship docked." The gremlin let out an indignant squeak, waving its small arms. The engineer grinned. "Oh, don't play innocent. You know exactly what you were doing." I took a deep breath. This was madness. I had spent years studying human culture, preparing for this first diplomatic meeting between our species, and not once had any official document or intelligence report mentioned this. I had expected unpredictability. I had expected innovation. But gremlins, the hidden workforce. "You need to start from the beginning," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Todd simply motioned for me to follow him. "Come on, I'll show you." We left the negotiation hall, walking through the dimly lit corridors of the station. Engineers moved past us, some carrying tools, others holding data pads, but none of them seemed fazed by the revelation that had just shattered my perception of reality. They knew. They all knew, and I was only now learning about it. We arrived at an industrial section of the station, a place that seemed to function as both a workshop and a living space for humans, and apparently, their tiny coworkers. I watched as a group of engineers worked on a complex piece of machinery, some kind of generator, judging by the energy signatures. But then I noticed something unusual. Small figures darting among the machinery, climbing up panels, tightening bolts, and rewiring circuits with astonishing precision. More gremlins, at least a dozen of them, each one wearing a variation of the same mechanic's uniform I had seen earlier. Some had different colored helmets, while others carried minuscule tool belts slung over their tiny frames. They moved with purpose, fixing, adjusting, optimizing. I stood frozen. "They're everywhere," I whispered. Todd grinned. "Yup." I turned to him, my mind reeling. How? Why? How does an entire galaxy know nothing about them? Todd chuckled. "Oh, some do. The ones who've worked with us long enough. But we don't exactly advertise it." I watched as a gremlin climbed onto an engineer's shoulder, handing him a tiny screwdriver that seemed far too small to be useful. The human accepted it without hesitation, as if it was a routine interaction. The realization hit me like a meteor. The humans weren't taming the gremlins. They had formed a partnership, a system of mutual benefit, and perhaps something even deeper, a species unmatched. "All right," I said, taking another deep breath. "Explain." Todd leaned against a nearby console, arms crossed. "No one really knows where they came from. Not even us. Some say they've always been here, stowing away on ships since humanity first left Earth. Others think they just started appearing when we hit a certain level of technological advancement. Either way, they're a part of our operations now." I narrowed my eyes. "So you trust them? You let these creatures run around your ships, messing with your systems?" Todd smirked. "Oh, they do mess with things, but they also fix them, sometimes before we even know there's a problem. That's the trade-off." I shook my head, struggling to understand. "But why? Why do they help you?" Todd's smirk softened into something more thoughtful. "Because we don't fight them. We work with them. We let them do their thing. And in return, they keep us running." My mind flashed back to the stories I had heard before coming here. Humans and their unorthodox problem-solving. Their ability to turn chaos into strategy. Was this just another example of that? I turned back to the gremlins, watching them move between the machinery like a well-trained team. Not a single one of them seemed lost or confused. They belonged here. Then, a new thought struck me. "You said they've always been on human ships," I said carefully. "Do they only work with you?" Todd hesitated, just for a second. That was all the answer I needed. The silent war. I felt a chill run down my spine. If gremlins existed only on human ships, then that meant something far more disturbing. These creatures, these intelligent, highly specialized creatures, had chosen the humans, not the Galactic Council. Not the ancient, highly advanced empires of the core worlds. Only humans. But why? I turned back to Todd, my voice steady. "Have they ever worked for anyone else?" He exhaled. "Not willingly." I stared at him, waiting. Finally, he relented. "Other species have tried. Captured them. Studied them. Even forced them onto their ships, hoping to get the same benefits we do. But it never works." I swallowed hard. "What happens?" Todd's expression darkened. "They sabotage everything. Full system failures. Power losses at critical moments. Sometimes ships don't make it back. And then, when it's all over, the gremlins are just gone." I felt the weight of his words settle in my chest. The gremlins weren't just helpers. They were choosing to help the humans. I looked around the room again, watching as the small creatures worked alongside their human counterparts, fixing, tinkering, improving. There was no hostility, no resentment, only a quiet understanding. And suddenly, I understood why the Galactic Council had never acknowledged their existence. Because the truth was far more terrifying. It wasn't just that humans had allies no one else could access. It was that something ancient and intelligent, had looked at the entire galaxy and chosen them. A species of warfighters, survivors, innovators. I wasn't sure whether to be impressed or terrified. Because if the Gremlins had sided with the humans, it meant one thing above all else. They were betting on the winners, the hidden pact. I couldn't sleep that night. After the revelation about the Gremlins, their existence, their alliance with humans, and the implications of it all, I found myself lying awake in my assigned quarters aboard the human station, staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed the events of the day. The small, mischievous creatures scurrying through machinery like ghostly mechanics. Their strange, unbreakable bond with the humans. The way Todd had hesitated before admitting that no other species had successfully worked with them. The implications were enormous. If the Gremlins were sentient, and I had no doubt they were, then they had made a conscious choice. They had aligned themselves with humans, actively resisted other species, and most disturbingly, sabotaged those who tried to control them. This wasn't just a case of a biological anomaly adapting to human technology. This was a secret war, one that had been happening in the shadows for far longer than anyone realized. The unseen network. Unable to shake my thoughts, I decided to do something reckless. I left my quarters and made my way toward the engineering sector. The station was quiet at this hour, save for the occasional patrolling security officers, but something about the atmosphere felt alive. As if, even in stillness, the very walls of this place were watching. I reached the industrial sector where I had first seen the Gremlins in action. It was mostly empty now, the human engineers having turned in for the night. But as I stepped into the dimly lit corridors, I saw them, the Gremlins. They moved through the room with quiet purpose, hopping from console to console, whispering in their strange, guttural language. Some carried tiny tools. Others seemed to be communicating silently, their glowing eyes flickering with unreadable expressions. They barely acknowledged me. It was unsettling. As an ambassador, I was used to being observed. Every species I had ever met reacted to my presence in some way. Curiosity, suspicion, reverence. But the Gremlins, they didn't care. Not in the way other species did. They had already made up their minds about me. I wasn't one of them. But the humans, they were different. I crouched beside one of the consoles, watching as a Gremlin twisted a tiny screwdriver into a panel. It worked with expert precision, making minuscule adjustments, its tail flicking in deep concentration. "Why humans?" I whispered. The Gremlin froze. For the first time, one of them truly looked at me. It was an unsettling gaze, calculating, intelligent, far too old for a creature so small. It let out a string of sounds, too fast for my translator to catch. I frowned. "Slow down." Another series of clicks, growls, and strange intonations followed, but this time, my translator managed to piece together fragments. They listen. They change. They'd break rules. I stared. What does that mean? The Gremlin didn't answer. Instead, it simply turned back to its work, as if the conversation was already over. I exhaled sharply. I wasn't going to get more out of them. Not tonight. But what it had said chilled me. They listen. They change. They'd break rules. Was that why the Gremlins had chosen humans? Because of their adaptability. Because of their willingness to push boundaries where other species feared to tread. I needed answers, and I knew exactly who to ask. Secrets of the Federation. Todd was already awake when I arrived at his office. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, sipping from a steaming mug of what I assumed was coffee. I sat down across from him. I need the truth. Todd raised an eyebrow. I thought you got the truth yesterday. No, I said. I got the surface. Now I want the real story. How long have you known about them? Todd sighed, setting his mug down. A long time. I waited, arms crossed. Finally, he leaned forward. You have to understand something about humans, he said. We didn't find the Gremlins. They found us. I blinked. What do you mean? Todd exhaled, rubbing his temples. No one knows exactly when they appeared. Some think they were there even before we left Earth. Others believe they only showed up once we started pushing the boundaries of physics and space travel. But what we do know is that the moment we started expanding into the stars, they were there, waiting, watching. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. So they've been with you since the beginning. Todd nodded. Pretty much. At first, we thought they were just pests, malfunctions that somehow fixed themselves, tools disappearing and reappearing, power fluctuations. But then we started seeing them, and once we acknowledged them, that's when things changed. I leaned forward. What changed? Todd's expression was unreadable. They helped. I narrowed my eyes. And you let them? He laughed. Are you kidding? At first, we tried everything to stop them. We locked them out of systems. We tried to track them. Hell, some scientists even tried capturing and studying them. It never worked. They always got away. And when we pushed too hard, his voice darkened. They pushed back. I swallowed hard. How bad? Todd met my gaze. Let's just say there are a few missing ships in our history that don't have explanations. The room was silent. So, I said slowly, you made a deal. Todd gave a slow, measured nod. Not in the formal sense. We didn't sit down and sign a treaty with them. But we learned. We realized that they weren't going away. So instead of fighting them, we started working with them. We built ships that accommodated them. We left space in our engineering sectors where they could work. And in return, he gestured around the station. They keep things running, sometimes before we even know something's broken. I exhaled. This was too much. You realize how insane this sounds, right? I asked. Todd chuckled. Yeah, it does. But it works, and that's all that matters. I shook my head. And no other species has been able to do this. Todd's face turned serious. No, and not for lack of trying. I thought of the Gremlins' words. They listen. They change. They break rules. Maybe that was the key. The Council, the galaxy as a whole, was built on rules, structure, hierarchy. Every species had its place, its limitations. But humans, they didn't see the universe that way. Where others saw boundaries, they saw challenges. Where others followed traditions, they rewrote them. Where others accepted reality, they changed it. And the Gremlins had noticed, and chosen them. The great unraveling. I stood up, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. Todd watched me carefully. So, what now? I had come here as an ambassador. I had come here expecting negotiations, treaties, discussions of trade and military agreements. But this was something else entirely. I had uncovered a truth that the galaxy wasn't ready for. A hidden alliance forged in the shadows. A war fought without weapons. And a species, humanity, that had been playing a game the rest of us didn't even know existed. I turned to Todd, my voice steady. Now, I said, now I decide if the rest of the galaxy is ready to hear this. And deep down, I already knew the answer. They weren't.